Thank you so much for that very generous introduction, Christina. And thank you for joining our Office of Justice Program's remarkable Assistant Attorney General, Laurie Robinson, in inviting me here to speak with this very distinguished group today. I do have to add a word of apology along with appreciation to Laurie in particular. I have to apologize for stealing as my principal deputy in the Access to Justice initiative at the Justice Department, one of Laurie's most accomplished, knowledgeable, and energetic proteges, Lynn Overman. Stealing isn't exactly right because Laurie reluctantly but generously gave Lynn's move from OJP to ATJ, you have to get used to acronyms in the government, her personal blessing. Lynn has brought with her to my office much of what only Laurie Robinson is capable of teaching. So it is to Laurie that I owe a great deal of what I am confident my initiative will be able to accomplish. You know, as my staff can attest, I've been very much looking forward to this event. The National Institute of Justice was founded just as I was ending my days as a law clerk at the U.S. Supreme Court. And ever since, I've followed its work with deep interest and appreciation. 4 decades later, it's a real honor to be here in my new capacity as Senior Counselor for Access to Justice to speak to your institute, an institute that reflects our nation's greatest traditions on a topic that calls forth our greatest ideals. You know, I used to be what some people call a hard scientist, actually. I received my undergraduate degree in mathematics, and I spent a year on a National Science Foundation fellowship, completing pretty much all the coursework for a PhD in mathematics at Harvard, becoming what I think they used to call an ABD, which stood for all but dissertation. I worked 6 summers at the Laurence Radiation Lab in Berkeley doing high-energy physics and programming computers. Spent a year at the National Academy of Sciences writing a report on technology assessment. The title of my first published article pretty much says it all: The Numerical Solution of Ill-Conditioned Linear Systems. I was, in short, a real geek. Although I eventually turned my attention to the law, as I guess some of you know, I could never shake that original passion. And as it turns out, it captured the imagination of someone else as well, the President of the United States. When he became my main research assistant as a first-year law student back in 1989, I've never before or since picked a first-year law student to be my main research assistant. We worked together on an article called The Curvature of Constitutional Space for the Harvard Law Review. The subtitle was What Lawyers Can Learn from Modern Physics. And I can report, although this will come as no surprise, I think, to you, that even back then, Barack Obama showed enormous scientific curiosity, a voracious appetite for truth, and a need to cut through complexity without oversimplifying it. We were dealing with Einstein's theory of relativity, with Heisenberg. Tough stuff. Now that impressed me, and it did bring us closer. His interests matched my own lifelong search for fact, for finding the truth of the matter, whether in mathematics or physics, or yes, even the law. Indeed, I believe one of the greatest threats to progress is the casual, even contemptuous attitude toward evidence and reality that some people in positions of power have at times displayed. An attitude that has bred a brazen willingness to censor and manipulate evidence for political ends. I'm deeply grateful to serve a president and an administration that has respect for evidence-based reality. And I'm truly delighted to address an audience in which I know that respect is deeply shared. In recalling my flirtations with the hard sciences, something I don't often actually think a lot about because I'm so preoccupied with other things, I am reminded of a story told by one of the pioneers of computer theory and artificial intelligence, the late Joseph Weizenbaum of MIT. Joe described to me how he once gathered a group of Nobel laureates to ask about the nature of knowledge. They all claimed to believe only in the hard sciences, none of that soft stuff that passes for understanding. Well, unconvinced, Joe probed deeper. How many of you, he asked, believe that a century from now we will all still be convinced by Einstein's famous formula, E equals mc squared? Of the dozen or so laureates present, just 3 raised their hands. And then he asked them, how many of you believe a century from now we will all still be convinced that the road to hell is paved with good intentions? Every hand shot up at once. You see, he said, you believe in soft science after all. I tell that story because it helps to underscore the misleading dichotomy between categories of scientific understanding. Knowledge comes in lots of flavors. Some lend themselves to straightforward quantification in hard numbers. Others are best expressed in geometric patterns or topological structures. Sometimes we need to be creative about measuring what might be called soft variables, parameters that point to phenomena that are not as easy to locate as points on a numerical graph. Phenomena like how people feel they are being treated by the institutions of their government. But what ultimately matters is not the form in which we seek to measure and document experience. What matters is that we observe the canons of scientific method in recording empirical truth as we find it, not as we wish it to be. And that's true whether we're engaged in quantum physics or sociobiology, in the operations of particle accelerators, or in the functioning of our system of justice. Since the day that President Johnson convened the historic Presidential Commission on Law Enforcement and Administration of Justice in 1967, the commission that led to the creation of the National Institute of Justice, you have been at the forefront of searching out verifiable patterns in the operations of law and justice that have eluded others. You've never feared those soft variables. You've embraced them. And it is that fusion of law, justice, and the age-old scientific method in pursuit of verifiable, even if not easily verifiable, truth that has made me, as you can tell, so excited about being here. But there's something else, or maybe I should say someone else. This April, I felt really honored to be elected as the 1,001st living member of the 267-year-old American Philosophical Society, which Benjamin Franklin founded in 1743. The mission of that society is to promote useful knowledge. Those words express more than a platitude. They embody a distinctly American philosophy that evokes the spirit of its founders, and in particular of its most scientifically famous founder, a visionary whose sense of the world, I've come to believe, best embodies the spirit of the National Institute of Justice. Franklin learned from everyone, the Iroquois, the French, the British, everyone in between. With his discoveries, he often saw what was invisible to others, and he proceeded to reveal what he learned, not for personal gain, but for the benefit of his fellow human beings. Consider the immortal story that we all know, the story of a bespectacled Ben snatching lightning from the sky with nothing more than a kite, a key, and a Leyden jar to collect the mysterious charge. Walter Isaacson's masterful biography of Benjamin Franklin notes the conclusion of the great historian of science I. Bernard Cohen that Franklin's experiments with lightning revealed truths of the same fundamental importance to physical science as Newton's law of conservation of momentum. And if we turn the clock back 258 years to this very month, we can indeed begin to appreciate that Franklin wasn't playing with fire in June 1752 merely to satisfy his curiosity. By revealing that lightning was electrical current and that it could be tamed with a rod, Franklin, again according to Isaacson, conquered one of nature's most terrifying dangers. Few scientific discoveries have been of such immediate service to humanity. You know, before Franklin tackled the problem, lightning regularly set fire to buildings like homes and churches and struck down men, women, and children every day. So he conducted his kite experiment, as he conducted all experiments, with an immediately useful application in mind, solving a deadly mystery that rendered life more precarious, one might even say less just. Think of the metaphor that we still use to describe processes, whether of nature or of human institutions, that strike without rhyme or reason. Like being struck by lightning, we say, an image that some Supreme Court justices have used to illustrate the constitutional infirmities of systems for meting out punishment that we have failed to tame with criteria to guarantee consistent and predictable application. Franklin, who regularly turned down the offer of patents and other material rewards for his work of discovery, sought not credit, but the immediate and material improvement of the human condition. You, too, put your trust not in owning knowledge, but in sharing it in pursuit of sound, evidence-based public policy. What Franklin once wrote in a letter to a friend, "What signifies philosophy that does not apply to some use?" could equally be said of your research here at NIJ. Indeed, like so many of you, Franklin was fundamentally restless until he was able to fuse his passion for measurement, discovery, and explanation with his conviction that there was no higher calling than public service. And after his most famous experiment, he turned almost exclusively to that calling. He founded a university that would train ordinary citizens to become extraordinary.